National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine Information Center spokesman will update you from the anti-terrorist operation zone right now. Шановні пані і панове, з оперативною операцією ЗМІ справ.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Russians shelled armed forces of Ukraine not far from Stepanivka. And we mentioned that in the morning. Information about casualties is absent. You see, first of all, they were shelling civilians and they were trying to strike military men. And Russian Federation militarymen make strikes from heavy artillery, and they boast over that in social networks. They don't hide that they make strikes on the territory of Ukraine, and send greetings to those who live in Yamal-Nemetsky autonomous district of Russian Federation. Here's the video of those strikes, and from original video. This is a real dance of Nadim guys. Russia continues to accumulate more military forces on the border with Ukraine and near borders of. They have about 45,000 military men of the armed forces and forces of Ministry of Interior, and about 160 tanks, 1,360 armored vehicles, and 390 artillery systems of different caliber, about 150 ground systems, 192 military combat aircrafts, and 137 helicopters, combat helicopters. And Russia began trainings of paratroopers. There will be 3,000 of paratroopers and about 30 aircrafts and helicopters of different kinds of aviation. As to the situation in ATO area, as a result of engagements of military activities, some people don't. There is a critical situation in Luhansk and Horlovka during the engagement. Infiltrators destroyed electrical substation Horlovka 11 and enterprise at Donbass Energo, and 4 pumps, water pumps from mine number 5 stopped, and the level of water could go up 1.5 meters a day, and then the central part of the city will be on the floods in Donetsk as a result of shelling. there are no electricity in Donetsk, and about 40 electric substations were destroyed. They put mines near Pridorozhny in districts Pridorozhny and Larino, and also they damaged hospital number 18. Donetsk militants, government, they started pressure on pro-Ukrainian activists and their families. There were several visits to the place of living of those such people. As mass media informs armed separatists, they have a list of patriots which were made public through social networks and with private data of activists. During the last briefing, there was a question about humanitarian corridors in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. During the last day, all transportation corridors were used by 1,135 residents of Donbass. Through additional points in Shastin in Luhansk and Dachny in Donetsk, they were used by 752 people. Information of the Ministry of Social Policy, they are prepared to take 119 kids from Kastodon boarding school, and also elder people and who are in the area of engagement. The terrorists don't allow to take children and the disabled. So we have negotiations as to the movement to boarding schools in Sumy, Kharkiv, and Poltava regions. Units of state service zone of emergency, renovating infrastructure of liberated city in Donbass from Slavyansk, Donetsk, Lysenko, Severodonetsk, and Rubishny Luhansk region. They took out about 80 tons of stones and cleaned 2 kilometers of streets. In Luhansk, Lysychansk, Luhansk region with engineering equipment, and they cut down constructions that was a threat of people in one 9-story building. They cleaned from explosive devices the territory of kindergarten number 8. During the day, and mining engineers, they found 165 explosive devices and unmined 5 facilities, and pyrotechnical units found, and 2 got out 156 units of explosives. And they found them at 9 administrative buildings, and they searched through 38 hectares of territory and 2 hectares of water reservoirs. And they don't stop their work because results of their work will influence on others can come only after these field engineers. They do that work which unprepared people cannot do. And the field engineers units are not that big, but they work non-stop. President Poroshenko in the phone call to Barroso, he told that it's possible to discuss the crisis in Normandy or other format, and it should be attention during the next meeting of the European Council on the 30th of August. José Manuel Barroso supported the initiative of President Poroshenko's to a humanitarian mission and clear position of Ukraine that it should be done according to international law. He also informed that the European Union is ready to invest 2.5 million euro for humanitarian assistance for Ukraine. And also he called to set up a special coordination institution to provide humanitarian assistance and to help IDPs. And the president told that he would like to implement a peaceful plan on and which includes a ceasefire and monitoring of the sea, liberation of the hostages, control over Russian-Ukrainian border to stop supplies of ammunition and mercenaries, and without any additional conditions. Last night in airport Borispol, a Canadian military plane landed, and with assistance, with equipment and ammunition. They sent medicine, sleeping bags, ballistic glasses, and Canada provided to Ukraine 32 tons of those equipment. And Cabinet of Ministers set up a state service on vets, disabled, and participants of ATO. It will be responsible for registration of ATO participants, the social support, job, medical, and psychological rehabilitation. They will be responsible for providing housing to those families of those who were killed and those who don't have normal living conditions. The terrorist information DNR spreads statements, and they are required to get special tickets for shells. That passport data will be used to house their people. So this is the statement. So we would like to warn people who live in Donetsk that this is a provocation, and they just want to use your apartment. They can turn it into a fire point for gunmen. That's all information, official information I wanted to provide for you, your questions. But before that, I would like to express my excuses to wives and mothers of military men who did their duty on the front line, on the first front line, and who returned to their place of dislocation to get recreation, to get social, medical, and psychological assistance. And because I used an expression of like social psychosis, and they took it personal. I didn't mean wives and mothers of our military men. They care about their children, about their family members. That's why in any case my expression that they do something wrong or they are an obstacle, it's not about them. They are correct, they are right, and they're women. They have the right to know where their husbands are and what happens to them. So once again, I underline my expression massive psychosis, it was not including them. I didn't mean them. It's about our people who are under the influence of Russian counter propaganda, of Russian mass media counter propaganda, and with that behavior, they say that they are against that. But wives and mothers say they have nothing against that Ukrainian military men fight for our country. Yes, it's very tiresome. I beg pardon for misunderstanding. Thank you. Any question here?
It's okay, you may ask, I will translate. It's fine.
Yeah, ready.
So my name is Ian Bateson. I'm from the Kiev Post. We've had journalists out in the East since April. One of them had spoken to different Ukrainian soldiers who had admitted to firing Grad rockets into urban areas with civilians. Over the past 2.5 days in the center of Donetsk, a dentist's office, a hospital, and residential buildings have all been hit by artillery near the SBU building, which is occupied by the DNR. Is that something that, that doesn't seem like an act of provocation? In the past you've said anything like that seems like a provocation. That seems like a focused effort to hit a clear military target. Is that something you're able to talk about? And if not, are you able to say that artillery is being used by Ukrainian forces in Donetsk at this point? Because that seems very clear to the people working on the ground there.
Thank you for question. Маю пояснення.
I have to explain. It was about artillery strikes in Donetsk. And there were strikes on shell in living areas. You see, we are not only just under conditions of war and active engagement, but we have also information warfare, because terrorists, they clearly follow orders that they receive from Russian Federation. They, on purpose, they strike upon living areas just to sell it as if Ukrainian armed forces do that. If you have information that any civilian suffered because of that strike, tell me. As a rule, they hit schools, they shell schools, and just buildings where people live. They don't make any strike against their headquarters or against their blog post or armored fire points in living areas. And that's a part of that information warfare, the goal of which is to convince everyone that Ukrainian armed forces shell Ukrainian civilians and terrorists. Ukrainian military men have only one goal, believe me, to liberate our cities and to save our civilian population and to save our infrastructure. It's completely different about terrorists. And the president mentioned his peaceful plan. We're ready for negotiations under any condition. He suggested there should be a ceasefire from both sides, and they should give up their weapons. They should liberate all hostages. Then we control our border with Russia. And the mission of observers should be from OSCE, and we are ready for constructive negotiations. Thank you.
The Ukrainian army in Donetsk.
Not. Будь ласка, ще питання у когось ще є.
Correct. Not. Is it true that Ukrainian armed forces cut off Donetsk from Lugansk, and now they prepare for the final stage of liberation of these two cities? That's the first question. The second, about civilians who decided to stay in Donetsk and Luhansk and not to leave those cities. What should be instruction for survival of those people? What they must do, what they must not do, just to stay alive? Thank you for your question. As to surrounding Donetsk and Luhansk, that operation is almost over. This is the part through which to Donetsk they were coming in through Lugansk, from Lugansk. This is under control. This area is under control of Ukrainian armed forces. There's a heavy engagement there. We cannot say that we come to cities without any fight. No, terrorists, there's a heavy engagement there, and terrorists understand that they are almost cut off in Donetsk, and they are in panic. They would like to leave the city. They change and flee away from the city. But also we have information that, for example, in Krasny Luch, terrorists don't allow civilians to leave the city, and they build a live shield of people. And the hope that will save them, no, it will not save them. Ukrainian special forces do everything possible for civilians to stay alive, and it will be a big problem for terrorists. And so the advice for them is to give up, surrender, and then they will live at least, and they will have to stand to the law, but they will stay alive. And as to civilians, the first advice: don't get out. If you can go to a shelter, if you can get some food, water, if you can leave the city, because there's almost no electricity. Don't use mobile phones, only when you need. Don't keep them on. Send SMS. Don't overload phone lines with conversation. Don't leave children alone. Keep an eye on them. If it's possible, get some medicine. If you don't need medicine, maybe someone else will need that, and you can help them. What else? The most important, believe that you will be liberated very soon. Radio Liberty. How efficient to change the strategy of offense of Ukrainian armed forces, like to pull up from the border and to start surrounding terrorists when you cut the territory into small isolated parts? And the second question: is there a plan in the general staff in case of advance of Ukrainian armed forces? Is there a plan if Russia starts full-fledged invasion? As to the tactics, yes, the change of tactics brought positive results. Precise destroyment of guns and columns with equipment that came out to be more efficient than frontal advance. And the tactic of splitting the groups of gangs and terrorists into small parts from different sides, they feel that they are surrounded, and a little chance to get assistance, supplies from Russia, etc. So we block them, and gradually we destroy terrorist gangs. I have to tell you that our advance is non-stop. It's impossible to stop it, but we do it very carefully, very gradually. And 100% intelligence, first of all, of the area where our troops are going to, and that intelligence informs to civilians how to get out. If there's any threat, there are special groups and like snipers and small technical groups, and they play the role of they are responsible for very specific task like destroyment of equipment and destroyment of their leaders, and that's very efficient. The second question was about possible full-fledged aggression and if there is a plan in the general staff in case because they accumulate their troops on the border. There was we changed the tactics how to fight against gangs. And in the east, also we keep it. We pay attention to the state border, of course, and we have special reserves, and who at any moment, it's not, and they will be moved, and they will cover the state border if there will be aggression. You have to understand that these units, they will not be able to stop everyone. They are set up. The tactics is to stop the invasion for an hour or so, for the country to mobilize and to use all its potential. Thank you. It's not a question. Cooperation between those who write letters to the Minister of Defense and who don't receive answers. I will handle that. Any other question? No question. Thank you very much. And tomorrow at 12:30 we will see you again. Thank you.
Thanks.